Right, so is that recording me over there, Tara? No, the speaker, the microphone. Is that the microphone? So welcome, Brent. So this is the subcommittee. We've got one apology or a leave of absence for Councillor Walker, who's still sick. So you've only got 3 of us here today, and we've got 2 submissions to hear. Okay. So my understanding is you get 10 minutes. So we're all ears. And
I'm not sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Kit. I don't think I'm going to need 10 minutes in terms of. I'm hoping that the invitation is to stay on for the workshop and have some discussion after this. You see the context of the board submission is we really struggled with the presentation and format and the content. And I was reminded by Councillor Ogilvie how important this was, but we definitely struggled with exactly what the heck we were going to be consulting in. So I'm really keen to hear your thoughts and talk through the workshop part rather than just sort of highlight the board submission as a whole was pretty thin, as you'll see.
okay.
And I guess I guess just at the end of it, I'm hoping there were a few more submissions in the 2 that you're scheduled to hear today, but that could also be some feedback in terms of it was a totally different format in terms of the consultation document. And us older fellas struggled with it.
Yeah, I've got to say, look, I got a printout of the draft catchment management plan and went through that rather than tried to do the one online.
I might do that now. Okay.
That's okay.
So if I'm happy to mute, and if after you've had your other presentation, if we can be involved in that workshop, that'll be really helpful. I've sort of taken a couple of. Okay.
My understanding is that'll be fine.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. So if you want to start now with what you want to tell us from your submission.
That is what I wanted to tell you, is we struggled with it. What you have in front of you is what you have in front of you, but I'm really keen to have a conversation in terms of as that transposes, because actually had a couple of councillors sitting in to try and guide us, and we also got back to the same point. And I see Deputy Chair Armstrong's just joined us, so it's good to see David there.
Hello, David. How are you? Okay.
Hey guys. Hey, kid. Sorry. Now.
No, that's all right.
But yeah, so even our youngest member, who's really technically astute, really struggled with that format as well. So I guess that's the feedback, is we struggled to understand what we were actually being asked. But I'm going to now Google that printout of that management plan that you're talking about. So that's my submission. Very, very brief, but really keen to discuss it after once you get to that workshop stage.
All right. Okay then. Well, thanks, Brent. So what we'll do is David was up next, isn't he?
120, I think.
But we've got to wait a few minutes, so we might just pause while we wait for David Ogilvie. Okay. So he's due in at 20 past. So we can't really have any discussions until we hear the next submitter. And look, I've had a couple of discussions with David. I've got a reasonable idea of what he wants us to do, and some of it's quite expensive, but that's okay.
I look forward to his wisdom. I'm just at that plan kit. So whereabouts is the hard copy rather than this?
Well, it's called the draft Motueka.
So through the chair, so I think those were printed out for you on from the web page. I don't think there's actually a PDF on the web or anything like that you can print out. It was simply made available to you as hearing panel members to basically use an alternative format.
Just that makes sense to it. Just remember that the community boards are often technically challenged as well.
I'm older than you, Brent, so I can be as technically challenged as anyone. In fact, my wife doesn't like to be nearby when I'm trying to put something on the computer because she says I swear too much.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, it just had some key issues, matters of significance, areas of concern, industrial and commercial zones, high risk activities, wastewater overflows, minimum stormwater treatment, and further reading. So those were some of the key issues that I took out of that. But that's okay. All right, well, what we might do is if David's coming back in 15 minutes, we might as well take a 10-minute break.
I think he's here.
Oh, is David Ogilvy there? Oh, he is there. He's popping up now, so we might be able to get ahead of ourselves. So that would be useful. We'll just wait till David comes on screen. I don't know if he can hear me.
I can hear you, Kit. Do you see me?
No, we can't see you at this stage. So you might have to click the video button.
I think he's got it pointing at something different.
Yeah, or maybe your camera's pointing the wrong way.
I'm not quite sure where my camera is, actually.
Are you using your iPad, David?
No, I can't get it to my iPad. That's why I'm a bit upset.
All right, so what are you using? Your laptop?
I'm using my computer at home.
Well, it should be, if it's a normal laptop, the camera tends to be in the middle at the front, like there. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right, so it's in the middle of the front of the screen.
Through the chair, Councillor Ogilvy, you may need to go into the Zoom settings and you can change your camera settings if there are more than one camera on your computer. Like some cameras have them on the back and the front, or if you've got a PC, it may be trying to pick up something odd.
Change.
Yeah, something's changed, David. We've got your name, but no picture.
Just a minute, I'll see if I can find something.
No rush. Like we're ahead of schedule. Yes, all right. So would someone like to move that? Then we can do that. So we've got an apology or a leave of absence from Councillor Walker. Moved Councillor Dallas, seconded Deputy Mayor Bryant. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. All right, so we've done that. So any luck, David?
No, I can't see anything here which is going to help it all without getting rid of everything, actually.
Just take your time. If you can. Something on. It's showing us the screen again, but it's like the back of a jersey or something. Or a curtain. Have you got a curtain behind your computer somewhere?
Yeah, I have them here. Is that better or not?
No. Still got the curtains.
Just changed colour a little.
Yeah.
Good chair. David, do you have an integrated camera, or is it on top of your monitor?
No, look, I don't know actually. I haven't used this for Zoom before. I've always used my iPad.
And it's just a laptop?
No, it's a furniture type computer.
Is there a little thing attached to the top of your monitor? Or there's a cable hitting from the back of your computer somewhere looking at a curtain? Because you've got a camera there, it's just picking up, I suspect, the back of your computer.
Something else?
Yeah, I reckon you open the curtains there. Something's changing, David.
I think it's fishing around for the cable, and he's got it now.
Yeah, that's it.
Anything happening at all or not?
Yeah, it's turning around, but I still haven't seen your face yet.
Here we
Oh,
go.
hang on. That's better.
Oh, it's trippy.
It's upside down.
Yeah. There we go, David. Yeah, we've got you now.
Yeah.
Well, yep, sort of.
Yeah,
Yep,
just about, yeah.
yeah. We're looking at your jersey though. Yeah, now you're right.
Yeah, you're good.
You were. Got his hands in front of it.
Yeah, there we go. Now we've got you.
Now it is.
Now we're looking at the ceiling. So
Okay, I'm just trying to stabilize it.
yeah. The must be, there's a little camera mounted on the,
Normally it sticks on top of the screen and obviously fall.
yeah.
Double sided.
Yeah. That's good now, David.
Right. Cool.
Well done.
Yeah, so we'll give you a couple of minutes to compose yourself and tell us what you want. And Brent Morrow's still listening as an observer, and so's David Armstrong.
Right.
And we've got one apology today. Trinity's still crook.
Shame.
Pretty close, David.
Oh,
Did you break it?
no. Not yet. All the hands up more.
Anything like that will be all right. We know where you are and we know what you look like. So
Thank you for that. No. I've lost all that, haven't I?
that's good there.
Try that.
Try that, David. Yeah,
Right,
that's
okay.
yep.
It'll have to do.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Now what the farmers don't know what to do.
All right. Well, David, we're all yours for 10 minutes.
All right, thanks, Kit. And look, sorry about the delays.
It's all right.
I want to highlight two general concerns effectively. One's to do with the presentation, and the headline on the Catchment Management Plan, or CMP, noted beneath it, best viewed as a digital story map. And straight away, the CMP loses its status and its direction. I do understand the holistic approach of a story map, with its emphasis on history, social, environmental, and cultural aspects. But a story map avoids the professional technical function of a CMP. That is, how to manage the stormwater needs and responding to those needs, the drainage, and any flooding concerns. In the CMP, there are 5 outcomes highlighted: healthy streams and aquatic habitats, less contamination of waterways, empowering development, enabling water-sensitive growth, providing an integrated vision, and finally, a lowly ranked 5th, reducing flooding. Also, the CMP was presented as a computer or digital interactive consultation process. And this, for many, became very difficult, even for those who regarded themselves as computer savvy. I understand a number of residents didn't respond after they found the website, became confused, probably angry, frustrated, and gave up. The printed copy of the CMP only became available at the service centre from February the 16th, with submissions closing 2 weeks later. Further, the level of community consultation was limited. One webinar, I think 3 people attended, no public forums, no visuals, and the staff liaise with those property owners along the various drains. For example, the Lummis drain, Thorpe drain, and even Hahaya Place. They talk with people like Peter Ingalls, Russell Hume, and Rick Benjamin along those drains. Likewise, the iwi consultation seems limited. Was Ngāti Tama consulted? There are no details of iwi consultation, no minutes, no records of any meetings. So the whole process of how the CMP was presented to the public and the degree of consultation, both with community and mana whenua iwi, appears flawed. And does it therefore meet the legislative requirements of the Local Government Act? I think it's section 82 for consultation. My second point is to do with programs and actions. The council makes a statement in the CMP, it will only be reactive to events, and that's quite concerning. It considers, it's the council, the plan, the existing drainage networks will cope with a 1 and 2 year event, possibly 1 and 5 year event. Essentially, that's business as usual, a minimalist approach, and subject, of course, to any work being cost effective. There's no knowledge or recognition of the real likelihood of intense rain events, even a 1 in 10 year situation, not to mention 1 in 50 or 1 in 100 year event. So there's a total lack of focus on the future. Certainly no innovation. For example, have rainwater tanks for new dwellings been suggested? Construct narrow roads to limit hard surface runoffs. Mention certainly is made of the Wakatoon subdivision in Motueka West. But how stormwater is to be managed is not described. Has the Woodlands drain the capacity to deal with this 200 dwelling subdivision? One of the 5 outcomes is a desirable outcome, less contamination of waterways. There's a photograph of the recreation centre car park adjacent to the Woodlands drain. The question is asked, but no answers provided as to how to deal with its vehicle contamination. Also, along the Lummis drain and the Thorpe drain, the various property owners, lessees, they graze beef cattle. Will council require fencing? Again, no answers. It would have been of interest and worthwhile if each of the drainage areas identified had been meaningfully assessed with future programs described. For example, how to deal with the limited capacity in Woodlands drain? How do we deal with the ineffective tidal flap gates at the Lummis drain and the Thorpe drain? This last named drain, the Thorpe drain, serves most of the central commercial areas in High Street. It also serves some residences west of High Street and probably 2,000 or 3,000 residents east of High Street. And discharge of this stormwater drain is essential. What's happening with the no drains in Bennett, Simpson, Talbot and McGlashan streets? Also, the document lacks sizable clear maps or diagrams. Maps showing where each drainage system operates will have been of benefit and useful. The lack of data is disappointing. The size of drains, where they exist, the number of soak pits and or sumps. What actually rainfall is a 1 in 50 or a 100 year event? Should the council plan for a month's rainfall in a 24-hour period? For example, the average rainfall for this current month of May is 123 mils. Would Motueka cope with that rainfall in 24 hours? North Shore and Gisborne had this earlier this year. There's no financial data provided or how the management of stormwater in Motueka will be funded. What's the value of the asset locally? What's the level of debt in the UDA? Actually 25 million. What's the DC situation? What's the annual target rate? What does the long-term plan propose for work in Motueka? Earlier last month, April the 6th, the chief executives of all unitary councils and the regional councils reported that for every $1 spent on flood protection, there's a $5 worth of benefits. Brilliant value for money. I'm hoping that this budget coming up through its Climate Emergency Response Fund and the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund may help the needs of Motueka. Our town receives very little of its stormwater needs from its council. I always contrast the 45 million for Richmond, minimal for Motueka since 2015, despite much of our town being low-lying and drainage gradient very slow. Our needs are desperate, essential, and urgent, and they're being, to a large degree, ignored. Thank goodness for the alluvial gravel and sandy soils we enjoy. It helps seepage immeasurably. Council is Kaitiaki, the guardian of our town and its people. By way of this SMP, and so this CMP, the council provides relief for anticipated heavy rain events as well as from standard rain events. It's not sufficient to provide relief for a 1 and 2 year event, even a 1 and 5 year event. The CMP is designed to protect our roads, our paths, reserves, as well as privately owned rateable properties, whether they be residential, industrial, even commercial. But this CMP, I believe, fails on many aspects. Perhaps my own expectation after waiting since 2015 was too high. It seems rushed. I believe it's poorly presented. There's minimal consultation, and the technical stormwater information of policies, programs is based on inappropriate maps and data is seriously lacking. There's little innovation, there's little financial information, there's little focus, if any, on the future. It seems to me it's a plan for yesterday, not for tomorrow. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, David. We've got a minute left if anybody's got any questions from the panel at the moment. Gary? Okay, David, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Right, so we can close submissions now, as I understand it. Yes, we'll close the hearing and then we'll go,
Sorry, just adjourn the hearing.
adjourn the hearing, yeah. So we adjourn the hearing now. Someone like to move? Deputy Mayor Bryant, seconded Councillor Dowler, that we adjourn the hearing. And then we're going to go into a workshop and we're going to allow people to be present, okay? So what I'd like to do, so we're in a workshop, just let, I'll say this, Wouter,
Yeah.
I got it right, Wouter, I'll tell you, I'm getting better. Just let you comment on some of those, on the submissions there, well, because this plan, it doesn't have budgets, as I understand it, and it shouldn't have. That's part of the long-term plan. And I know, David, you made a comment about Richmond. I think some of the money spent in Richmond is actually part of new development, and it's been paid for by the developers, a significant amount. But I know that we still haven't done the stuff in relation to Washbourne Gardens and the Washbourne Drain, and that's waiting for a business case, isn't it? It's been put off. So it isn't all being spent in Richmond, David, that's for sure. But we are aware that this plan has come after. But if you just like to comment on that, it's a high-level plan and it doesn't have, and I had a look at the aspirations, it doesn't have budgets and it's not close to.
Yeah. So through the chair, yeah. So the plan provides guidance to our long-term plan and activity management plan. It follows the aspirations and objectives that were set in the stormwater strategy that was adopted by council in 2019 from memory. And these apply for the entire district. So it's not that we set separate aspirations for Richmond and Motueka and Mahua. We have these aspirations that apply across the district all the same. And they go across these 5 themes like healthy streams, water quality, flooding, integration, and how we enable water sensitive development. So how you so then for each of the catchment management plans individually, we set targets of when these aspirations will be met, a medium target and a long-term target, and then based on those targets, we identified improvement actions that need us to get where we want to be in a number of years.
These,
So
are
that's-
nice, these are nice targets for Walter, but in the end, there are no, so nice aspirations and nice words. But I'm looking for targets and dates and funding, and there's none of this, not even a long-term plan. I mean, the CMP is the opportunity to give not just a high level, but a detail level for a lot of people who are looking at this CMP to provide answers to questions, and you're not giving those. Okay, you can't argue with the 5 outcomes I mentioned, but there's no detail in terms of what actions, what programs, what projects, what funding is actually going to achieve the aspirations you're targeting. There's nothing like that at all. It's just words. And
Yeah, so
I'm sorry,
David, if you
it's
let
not good enough.
the staff respond, I think what they say is these plans are strategic plans, and then you have to build a business case for actions. And Richmond's waiting for a business case for one since the flooding we had in 2013. So I'm going to let Dwayne respond. Okay, so you can just wait for his response.
Through the chair. So this document doesn't stand alone by itself, and it's not a standalone process that dictates everything stormwater in Motueka or indeed Richmond 1 and Richmond. What it does outline is the direction of travel that the council wants to take. It outlines the key issues and what we think we can do about it. Very broad brushstrokes, admittedly, but it does do that. There is a lot of detail that if the plan is adopted, that gets considered through different processes. There are better business cases that need to get run through. The funding and the programming is done as part of the asset management plan and the long-term plan. This document doesn't get to override those things. It simply is an input into that process, just like many other plans. And I'll draw a parallel between this and the walking and cycling strategy. Also has kind of high-level aspirations, some kind of high-level plans, the details of which and how they get funded and when they'll get funded is worked through with the annual plan and the long-term plan process. And this is exactly the same. Well, do you want to draw on details?
Yeah, just hang on, David. Let's word it.
Yeah, I can just share some of the detail that is provided in the plan, because some of that
And then we'll go to Brent.
Yeah.
Brent's got a question after you, Will.
because some of that was mentioned in the submission. For example, soakage is proposed in the plan to be investigated and looked into as a solution to solve some of that nuisance flooding, especially to the west of High Street. We're also suggesting to come up with a prioritized program of sump upgrade. That's something that the roading team has already started and that we have seen some good outcomes on, but that can be continued and further improved. Another thing is that we're suggesting in this plan a prioritized program of work. So there's multiple areas that require more bespoke solutions, for example, to redirect open flow, other smaller interventions that can help reduce that nuisance type flooding. One of the things that the plan doesn't do is address the more extreme flooding events from 100-year with a 100-year return period, and that's something that the plan explains as we've looked into those potential solutions and find those really hard to justify based on costs and technical implications of implementing these solutions. So there's quite a number of improvement actions. Also for water quality, by the way, there is a suggestion to have treatment for our council-owned car parks, for example, as an action in the plan. And for each of the aspirations, there's a table that lists all these actions.
Okay. Yeah, I know that the residents would be more concerned about flooding than treating the overflows from the car parks, to be honest, I'm sure. But I know that with the fresh water quality, that's an issue that we have to face. But it must be similar from stormwater runoff from all our roads, because that would really affect the quality of water. Brent, you've got a question?
Yeah, and it's a question statement, I guess. Is that actually I couldn't have articulated David's his submission probably better, really, because it backed up in terms of where we got to. But I guess where I'm confused is normally when we consult on a management plan, it does have that detail. So this seems more like an overarching strategy in terms of the key principles of managing wastewater, water, and that sort of thing, rather than what we tend to see as a management plan. Because even some of the points that were mentioned that are sitting behind the plan, our board didn't even get to them. So we got lost amongst this presentation and higher level aspirations, looking for detail that we'd normally look for. So I just want to support Councillor Ogilvie in terms of, I thought he may have found some bits I hadn't found and had some more answers in the plan, but it's something that I don't think we still have an opinion on, because we don't really know what the outcome of this document is, other than an aspirational strategy rather than a management plan specific.
Dwayne?
Probably the only thing I'd say is that none of our things or plans contain budgets and staging of programs. I mean, if you look at the reserve management plan process, for example, you can draw a parallel between this and that as well. So we don't put timing of projects. There is definitely projects in there, and that's sort of a plan. Timing and funding and costs are worked out, as I say, through the long-term planning process. One thing I just want to say from here is that, look, we've heard the feedback around the format for the CMP online, and I can say we still believe that is actually a really useful format for developing complex information. But when we run through this process again, because there are several more of these that we have to do for other parts of the district, we'll be making sure that they can be pulled into a more traditional format document for people in the future. So I just wanted to address that, because I know that you guys keep coming back to it, and we're urging what I'm trying to say there.
I guess I remember when we did the Motueka reserve management plans, there was definitely detail around projects. So yes, no budgets and timelines, but there was definitely substance that we could drill down to, compared to substance that I couldn't find in this plan.
Yeah, through the chair, part of that is because what you are probably looking for is big stormwater flooding projects. And I guess, one of the things in this workshop needs to confront, and the hearings panel will need to, is that is that achievable, feasible, and a wise investment, given the challenges that are laid out in the plan?
Yeah. So if I look at if I read the document that I've got in front of me, and I look at some of the key issues, and they are increased volume and path of stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces, piping of natural streams, which results in decreased flow, pipe networks which have insufficient capacity, overland flow paths which are obstructed by buildings, development of low-lying areas which are naturally prone to flooding, and climate change. So I don't think any of those are a surprise to us. And having visited Motueka, particularly Paul Street when they were getting flooding, it was in the previous term I went over with Councillor. No, the other one before that. After that, Paul Hawkes with flooding, and particularly, and it was a block drain was one of our district water. Yeah, it was one of our issues. So David, basically what you want is more detail and timelines and results or budgets.
Well, look, Brent and I are on the same wavelength, because this isn't a high-level strategy. This is a stormwater management plan, how to manage the stormwater requirements, needs, and the flooding concern is part of that. But it's not it may be the main part if there's a 1 in 10 year rain event. But we can't even in Motueka sustain a 1 in 10 year event. You're looking with the Bork drain, the Bork Creek, at a 1 in 100 year event. Where's the consistency? This is where it's so frustrating in terms of trying to look at Motueka as the second largest town of our district, and what are we getting from the council in terms of managing both the stormwater needs, whether they be a an annual rain event or a 1 and 2 year rain event, or even a 1 and 5 year rain event. It's just not happening.
Yeah,
And
David, I think
the intention is to have this as a management plan. Okay, we've got the ATM, the activity management plans. You mentioned the reserves management plan, but as Brent has indicated, in the reserves management plans, I've just finished the Waimea Mutri one on the panel. We looked at programs, policies, classification. Okay, we haven't given funding, but there's a fair bit of work there involves in what policies, what programs are going to happen, short term or long term, rather than immediate or anything else. So that's what I was expecting of this CMP, and it's just not there. It's not a waste of time because there's a lot of good high stuff there. It's all valuable information, but it's not really related too closely to the needs of our town.
but what we need to remember is
Even in the annual plan and the long-term plan, what is there currently? Not much.
no, and that's what we will make some recommendations. But this is actually a catchment management plan, not just stormwater. I think so. So it is a very high level document. So that's something to remember, I think. But from this, we need to come up with some stormwater actions.
And that confused people because there were at least two of the submitters felt that it was about the gravel extraction in the Motueka River. And really, the plan, well, I think the Trevor Howley submission and then it was a Neil Whiffen submission and even the community board submission got confused with the word catchment in terms of linking it with the river. And really the whole intent was to make it a stormwater catchment management plan. And that's really contained within the Motueka UDA. There's not really even a really good map of the UDA in the CMP. Some of those maps are really not maps at all.
All right, through the chair.
Yeah.
I think it might be, I mean, we've gone into the detail. I wonder if it's worth just backing the truck up a little bit and giving Walter and Emma the opportunity just to kind of describe the environment we're working in Motueka, because it seems like there's a comparison being made between Motueka and Richmond, and there are really different challenges and opportunities. And there is, I keep coming back to this point, that I feel like there's a bit as a concern that there is a lack of comprehensive projects in Motueka, and I think they need to explain to you about what's behind staff thinking here, why we've got the plan that we have. That's all right.
Yep, that sounds good to me. If other committee members have.
Just wondering, Emma, if it's worth pulling up a flood map, so we can.
You want to share it?
Share.
So hopefully we're going to share this, David, and you and Brent and David Armstrong can see it.
But in the meantime, I can start talking about the problem and challenges that we face in Motueka, and also maybe in relation to those to issues that we have in Richmond, because I understand there's not often that comparison, but it's quite different issues in both towns. What we have in Motueka is obviously not a lot of gradient to discharge water based on gravity. We have a high tide. We're very lucky with the fact that we are operating those tidal gates on Wharf Road and keeping the estuary there empty in times that we need that, and that's actually working really effectively. So that there in itself is probably the biggest opportunity for Motueka, optimizing how those gates are operating and ensuring in the future that we have that benefit as long as we possibly can, considering future sea level rise as well. The other issue in Motueka is that there are natural flow paths, and you can see them coming. You can see them on the flat map at the moment. You can see those old river arms and flow paths are branching off those old river arms, flowing towards the coast. And basically, where they hit High Street, where they hit High Street, that's also where the issues start. And a lot of High Street is a dam. In fact, so a lot of the flooding along High Street is caused by those overflow paths not properly, crossing there. And in other places, there are buildings within those natural flow paths. There are historical maps that show those historical flow paths quite clearly, and they're either replaced by a pipe. The pipe doesn't have that same capacity, or just build over and they disappear completely. The pipe capacity that's been put in Motueka in the past doesn't have the capacity to convey 10-year flows. Upgrading a pipe, especially when there's little gradient, requires a massive upgrade. We need a very large pipe size to convey those flows if you have little gradient. With limited cover, that's often just not an option. So, and then on top of that, we're discharging against a high tide, and in the future an even higher tide. Especially if you're not discharging in areas, I'm not discharging into the estuary behind Wharf Road, but straight to the coast, are quite problematic. So those are some of the issues. Now we have looked at in total 17 different options of alleviating these flood issues, and they're combinations of things like upgrading pipes. There's areas where there are no stormwater pipes in Motueka, so one of the options that we did. So that's what if we put a pipe in every single road? What would that do? You know, regardless of whether that's even feasible or not, it's good to understand what that would do. We've modeled pump systems both at the end of Thorpe Drain and Woodland Drain, as well as in the middle of the area of Motueka East, where the issues are the biggest. So in the area of Clay, Moffat, and Woodland, Greenwood, sorry. We have modelled bunds. We have open drain. So reinstating basically those historical flow paths, because we know pipes are not pipe upgrades are not possible. The other option is actually creating a green corridor. Now that would work, but is a massive intervention, of course, because we go straight through residential properties, requiring quite a lot of land acquisition, and still quite significant engineering solutions to feed into that open corridor. However, that has made it into our activity management plan as a project for, well, quite far out, because we're looking at the cost and think, wow, that's a lot. And if you look at the number of properties benefiting, because that's the cost benefit that we did, we have done floor level surveys of properties that are at risk, so we know the exact floor level, and we can compare that to our modeled flood level. So that way we have a relatively good understanding of how many properties are actually at risk of getting their floor flooded. Much better understanding than what we have in Richmond, by the way, because we're starting that floor level survey exercise in Richmond now as well. But we're a bit ahead in Motueka. So you can count those properties that would benefit from interventions like that. And then on the cost per property, you're looking at something between 600,000 and 1.5 million, depending on what solution you're looking at. And based on that, we feel it's not a good proposition. At the same time, we also feel that Motueka doesn't has quite significant flooding even in smaller events. So maybe we should shift our focus towards that sort of flooding that occurs in more frequent events and invest a bit more in those. Because they actually impact the community more frequently, and they would actually notice the benefit from those interventions more frequent.
Is that what we would describe as nuisance flooding?
That's what we did. Yeah. But then there's the question as well. How much do you want to invest in something that is, I don't want to say just a nuisance, but yeah, it is type of flooding that you can walk through with your gumboots and be okay. However, it's your garden is underwater. Maybe your garage is starting to get pretty wet. Can be pretty significant still.
Yeah.
Especially when it happens frequently.
Especially if it happens like once every 2 years, once every 5 years. It's pretty not great.
Okay. Now, I hope people can still hear us. Now, the sort of interventions that we've talked about, and I know that the open channel and some of those things, I want to hear from my other members here, is really, really expensive for the number of properties that it ends up being benefit. And in actual fact, you would be cheaper to buy some properties. But I just want to talk about soakage and what we call retention ponds. And just as a principle, because we're still in public. So I know in other areas around the district, and certainly I see them in Richmond, where we have some reserves that are used for retention. And I can think of Bill Wilkes is like a big retention area. So is Washbourne Gardens. We've got another one at the bottom of the cemetery. And all those are around creeks, but we still had those, but we still ended up with significant flooding before we did the upgrade in Queen Street, which was an upgrade that was planned for other reasons as well. But we haven't done the one in thing. So could we use some sort of soakage in areas in Motueka to help us with that type of what you call nuisance flooding, which is that flooding that happens relatively frequently?
Yeah, through the chair again. Yes, soakage is a good potential solution for that nuisance type flooding, especially where the groundwater table is low enough. So you're looking primarily west of High Street. We do have those river gravels, so infiltration is generally quite good. But yes, the closer you get to the coast, the more effect you get. From tidal. There's actually a groundwater map there that Emma bringing up.
So in other words, when you get close to the sea and you've got tidal effects, it wouldn't work as well.
No, that's correct. Yeah,
because and I can relate to that because in Lower Queen Street, where on the other side of McShane's Road, in the winter with tidal events, you only have to go down half a metre to find water.
Yes.
So the water table is quite high. Yeah. And it's tidal, obviously. So that would be similar here.
Yes. Yeah.
So it would have more benefit on the west of High Street than it would on the east, or not, or nearer the sea side of High Street.
That doesn't mean that there aren't any areas east of High Street where you shouldn't do it. It's worth investigating. It's more likely to have an effect to the west of High Street. Yeah. Especially longer term as well.
Barry, or
No, I think you've covered it pretty well, actually. Welcome and your questions, but there's not a lot of options, is there? That's one of the problems.
That's the problem. Yes. Yep.
Well, there are expensive options like some big pipes.
Yeah, the best option, the option that works the best had the biggest effect was pumping.
Yeah.
Putting 3 big pump stations in that area of Clay, Hofford, Greenwood, and pumping it out to Limmers Drain. Yeah. That requires very significant infrastructure investment. and you're only using that in those extreme events.
Yeah.
So, almost never, but you got to get them in that really high operational state of being able to operate when you need it.
Right, so in terms of the one I want to explore is probably a slightly lower cost option, but to get rid of nuisance flooding, soakage. How many areas would we need to make a significant change to the town? Any idea? Because that's one of the keys.
Quite a lot, because the flooding is so scattered, and it's not that there's 2 or 3 areas where there are also 2 or 3 areas where the flooding is really bad, but then there's multiple smaller areas that are very quite sort of specific, where you could do something with. So you're talking about, Emma,
No, so we have some already that are in the roading, as opposed to where we don't have a pipe to use a soak pit, and they work quite well. So using more soak pits that increase that density would kind of reduce some of the ponding in the roads, but for any event that's relatively large, once the ground gets quite saturated, you're and you can't and technically you can't really put them in overland flow paths either, because they won't function.
No.
They should.
Because
the ground's wet.
the ground's wet. Yeah. So you have to put it in a pipe and pump it.
Yeah, so it would be using. So we'd be using them to, as opposed to kind of, if we don't have a pipe in the ground, but we have some kind of, we don't have enough sumps, we would kind of use soap. That's appropriate.
Would that make so for me, you always start with the worst areas, the areas affected the most, and you work your way backwards. Would that, you guys agree with that?
That's what we've done.
So what I would, sort of the strategy that I'd be thinking of is we make a recommendation or something, or we look at the worst areas affected with this nuisance flooding first, and do that earliest, and then you assess. Once you've got rid of those and fix those, then you look at the next set. So you maybe divide them into 3 lots or 4 lots. So you say, right, first strategy is to do these worst ones. Then we look at the next ones, and each of these you have to do a cost benefit analysis, because you're going to have to justify that. And I'm probably pretty sure you guys have got some idea of that already. So you do the worst ones first as a priority. Because one of the things about this is with the 3 waters, if we invest this money now before the change, the debt goes with the 3 waters.
Correct.
If I understand it. Yeah. So that's why, and David, you'll like this, that's why I think there's some urgency to do this in the next couple of years, because my concern is going forward that we will, and I know, I think I discussed this with Richard Kirby earlier, that once we become part of a bigger organisation, some of these small things may get missed out going forward from these entities, because they'll just see it as nuisance rather than other things. But if we can address some of this now, get it in place, we spend the money and borrow, then that actually debt leaves the council. So there's still a debt, but it's shared by a much bigger group. Yeah. Stuart.
Thanks, Jim. But is that part of our requirement to be working out the program going forward through this process?
We can make a suggestion.
Yeah, through the chair. I mean, certainly, if your intention to say you want to have a program of soak pits or detentions investigated, and that would be my very first suggestion, because they probably do some groundwater testing and testing the soils in places to see whether they'll be any good at all, because there's no point doing it in some places if you actually say your water table is so hard to meet it down. And the other thing you'd need to consider is how you then make recommendations back to the council for the annual planning process either this time or next. So I've just read the draft annual plan report, and there's nothing in there about Motueka CMP. And one of the unfortunate things is I don't think your recommendations are going up in time, but we could But if you made recommendations today, we could certainly include it in commentary, even if it hasn't yet been accepted by council. And that would have to be then considered through the annual plan process.
Yeah.
What we do have programmed is a workshop. One of the things that the council's resolutions on the 16th of December said is that we have to take your recommendations to workshop with council before we take it to them for final adoption. Well, we'll still need to do that, but if there are things you resolve today, we would obviously we've got a workshop. Sorry, we've got a deliberations meeting on the annual plan in 2 weeks' time, and would be mentioning that so they could take it into account whether they accepted it. Would be up to them. But I do want to, Walter, I mean, could you please explain, probably to me too, but to the working group, what is planned regarding detention, soakage, that sort of thing in Motueka in the plan, and what would you think would need to be changed, having heard this discussion, to give effect to what the council did?
Yeah, so through the chair, the plan proposes to develop a soakage strategy.
Yeah.
So to look into ground conditions, where does soakage work, where it doesn't work, and identify those locations where you want to implement a soakage. That's one. The other thing that the plan proposes is a prioritized program of works. So you prioritize all those interventions, and it's not just soakage. There are, like I said before, locations where a bespoke engineered solution will help that nuisance type flooding, and sometimes there is a pipe or that's an increased inlet. And one of those locations is, for example, Red Street, where the water just can't get across High Street, goes with a siphon. There are some options to
Fix that.
not fix it, but improve it. I find it really hard to say that they can be fixed. What will help tremendously is once Motueka West gets developed, because that land will be raised a little bit, and those open flow paths can't get to High Street anymore. They will need to be diverted through the new discharge pipe. They will need to detain the balance on their land. So Wakatu, the developer, needs to come up with a detention volume to mimic current flows and not exceed that. And then the current flows all need to go into 1 year diversion pipe toward woodland. But once
You
that's
hear
done,
me, Kit?
Pardon?
Okay, right. I wasn't quite sure whether I was on mute or not.
No, yeah, I can still hear you, David. All right, carry on.
so I see opportunities to, in combination with the project that's already been prepared for Motueka West, to combine that with improvements on that Red Street, High Street intersection. That's enough. So that's one of those bespoke sort of interventions that we can do. Listing all those, prioritizing them, focusing on the worst areas first, and so on, is what the plan is currently proposing.
Stuart?
No, that's all good.
All right, Barry? Because that's one of the ones you and I just talked about.
Over the last few years, we've seen the large pipe go down.
Pool Street.
Full Street.
Full Street was one to fix that area up there, which connected in. There's one went down Parker Street when Tomato subdivision was done that wanted to
Oh,
pay.
yes.
We paid for a bit to upgrade the size to the next level, and that goes straight down Perham Street, discharges into another drain.
Yeah.
The Full Street one, it comes down. I think it turns left onto High Street and discharges into that pipe as well. We've got overland drains that I've viewed over the few years that I've been on council and community board. Around the top end of the town, the north end of the town, we've walked through some of those drains and seen where the people have built these sections up or built the fence and put the hunk of iron down to stop the water flowing through. It's really hard to make that work, I suppose. David would be aware of those, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But my biggie is the Red Street one, and I've been down there and stood and watched the siphons working, and it goes onto one side and pops out the other, and it runs at 900 mile an hour down our gutter, and then down into a stormwater grate in Woodlands Avenue and disappears. We never see it again. And so my theory was, why are you running it down a gutter where there's already water in it? Why don't we just pipe it straight from the stormwater network?
Yeah.
You know, and if the pipe under the road is not big enough, talk to NZTA about getting that pipe upgraded because it's their road.
Is that your plan, roughly?
More roughly.
Yeah, but the other concern for me is when you get over towards Grey Street, and the Wakawira Street area there. You come, we'll start at Queen Victoria Street corner and Wakawira Street.
Yeah.
And the water throws through there on the diagonal over to the corner of Green Lane and Grey Street. If you go down there in an average rain event, you'll see Mr. Levine's section. There's about 4 inches deep in water right across. He hasn't actually made it into his house, but he quite regularly gets flooded into his garage. Then it heads from that corner through the Wakatu land, and that's where it pops out into the Rat Street situation. So, you know,
So that's over quite a bit of
it
farmland.
is, it all come, and I don't know why it doesn't soak, because the water table there, I live just down the road, and we were lifting 6 meters out of our well from the water table. You know, it just seems really, really weird. Why all that overland happens there.
Oh, look how much water goes that way.
You know, so you see, where all the water courses are there, and I think some of the issues on the east side of town is created by the amount of water that we're not stopping from the west side of town, and is there a way? Hopefully, the Wakatu subdivision will intercept some of that water, but it won't intercept it all.
Well, it still needs to end up. Where it needs to end up, we can't stop it.
No,
Yeah.
but we can. And how do we get it into the?
That's a lot of water flow over farmland, isn't it? When you look at it today, look at that. You know, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm seeing 7 major water flow paths across there.
So
The colour creates the depth, doesn't it? The darker colour, more depth.
I'm just showing overland flow paths, so
All right.
all the,
Colour.
I'll go back to the
All right.
actual.
But what it does do is show that a significant amount of water comes overland from farmland. Doesn't it?
And of course, if a farmer's doing it right, it doesn't dry out during the summer.
No.
Stays wet because they've got to irrigate their crops, because it's all horticulture.
But when that gets developed, we'll actually have more hard surfaces. But they'll have to have some form of detention or retention because of that. Because it's a standard, correct?
You want to talk about the project there, Welsh?
Yeah, so the project, the council project there is to take a pipe from that Motueka West area through not Red Street, but the one north of that,
Low Street.
Low Street, through Low Street and through the church land there towards Woodland. That pipe,
Down to that woodland drain on the right.
that pipe is only capable, and then we're talking about the maximum, which I think that's, isn't it the double 900 or something, massive
That's
system.
So it's a 1.8 metre pipe. Or
Next to
2 900s.
But it's at a very flat grade, about half a degree.
So one of the problems I understand, guys, is that it's because it's flat, the water table's high, it's got sea level effects, you can't go deeper.
No,
because it'll just sit with water.
yeah. We're already the culvert under High Street is actually not in accordance with NZTA's standards. So, but that double pipe, they'll be able to take current flows through there. Nothing in addition that the development itself will develop. So that will need to be detained by the developer.
And it's not the whole development either,
No,
only
no.
a portion.
Yes.
You want to go back out?
The only concern I have, when we listen to Wakatu Corporation, I'm not sure how quick some of the developments are going to happen there. Because they're on hold at the moment, aren't they?
Do you mind if I just manually point rather than?
Yeah.
So at the moment, through the chair, they're looking at, if you could pop it down a little bit, please, Emma. They're kind of looking at this quadrant here,
through here for development, because as you've pointed out, I think you probably know the lease arrangements down there.
Yeah, they won't get those for 30 years.
They were dictated a long time ago, and Wapiti have had difficulty getting out of them. So previously, the very long-term planning that was done before Wouter got here was to have a detention basin here and have water some coming through to here somehow. The problem is we don't have access to that land, and neither do Wapiti. So that's why there's a kind of a split approach now, if you like. One which is kind of dealing with this issue here. Wouter's talked about pipe coming through to here and some detention here. And actually, that's one of the points of contention between some of the parties up there. I won't go into detail. And then longer term, to realise the rest of this land here, when it is able to be developed through something further along this way, or this way.
Down onto College Street and then, or Edward Street.
And then through there, yeah.
And is able to pull up some of that flooding, but it's really dependent on that long-term development to pay for it. So it's very difficult and very expensive to do it in the meantime.
And then you're talking about the Gore Creek type of solution, because you need quite a wide open channel to cut off all the open flow and send it to the estuary. But you do solve all the flooding that's currently happening along Courtney Street, for example, as well, and flooding along High Street. So could be, and then in terms of the development can again for a large part pay for that through their DCs. But very similar to Gore Creek.
Going back to the pipe through the church land, like I called up that pipe about 4 months ago. We were waiting for.
Did you have
We're doing a test. Put it that way. Had to start people put fire hydrant on Woodlands Avenue, and we poured cubic meters of water down there, and I was up the pipe with the torch waiting to see how long it took. It took quite a while to come down, and it didn't. It was a little boy having a piddle. That's basically what you put it, because it wasn't fast. But that is a reasonable size pipe. So you're talking about putting extra additional pipe about that size adjacent to that area. Cool. Okay.
And that project is in the next 3 years. In fact, it's in the investigation phase now. There are discussions with landowners, etc.
Yeah.
And that will help which area?
Well, it's down here.
So
is that down the importance curve?
No, it's up.
it will help anything between Red Street and Low Street, basically. So this flooding here, and hopefully we can, through combining it at that Red Street, we can take care of that as well. It's basically looking at how can we best cut off these overflow paths into a pipe that's sending.
We've got to take the pipe basically from High Street across to there.
Yes. Yeah.
And do you take it down a road?
Low Street.
Yeah.
And then through the church land there.
All right. Okay.
And then we're also limited by capacity in Woodland Drain.
Yes.
So it's
Exactly.
So the tidal gate on Woodland Drain is not working now, or is it still? It is still operable, but it's not used.
It is used, but primarily, my understanding, to avoid salt water going up the drain and affecting the trees in Thorpe Bush. So,
all right. Now, what about?
Kit?
I've got a left field question, David. Do you all want to listen to this? What's the option of increasing the capacity in the woodland drain? Because if I look at that woodland drain, it's mainly farmland on that eastern side, isn't it?
No, that's Goodman Park.
It's actually a sports ground.
All right.
but
But how much? Could it be?
Know the area.
Could it be dug out a little bit? Would that help?
No.
I'm a layman. I'm asking the question. I'm not an engineer.
So our modelling shows that flow from here does, or like in the large events, flow onto the sports field. So the sports fields already sit lower than these properties.
So that's part of our retention there, or soakage already.
Yes, in a way, yeah. So this overland flow path gets into here, and then this drain was to reach capacity, it would spill into here.
Yeah. So it doesn't help.
Can I just check something with the staff? It obviously already overflows there. If you dug out the drain further, would that do anything to relieve the frequency of playing on the sports grounds? Because that's the only benefit of it, right? Is the sports grounds not being flooded.
We make it wider, maybe, can't really make it deeper.
It's quite flat already, and I don't think you get that much gain
Yeah.
from it.
You're not predicting anything but sports grounds.
Yeah, and you're not dealing with, as we discussed, these overland flow paths actually getting to the drain in the first.
Which is actually putting a drain through there, a pipe, I mean a pipe drain. Which is, that's what you're talking about.
No, it'd be further. It's up here for this property.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
What we do need to make sure is that that pipe doesn't lead to those sports fields inundating more frequently.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So how do you,
they're already at risk of getting flooded. We can't make it worse. That's just a fact-based resource.
Which is why we're limiting that, where that 2 cubics comes from as well.
right. Okay.
So for chair, that's the capacity effectively of those 2 900mm pipes.
This,
Okay.
We've seen some problems.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just
Yeah.
it's been about a year and a half since I've sat in that office, but certainly there's been times when that drain has been chock-a-block to the rim, and so it must have an effect downstream, coming off High Street and coming off Rex, wherever the feed is from down there. And I'm sure I've read something about suggesting that it was redug out, because it's obviously silted up and it's growing up now, so the original depth is certainly not what it was when it was installed. So I'm not sure that your suggestion isn't a valid one, Mr. Chair.
All right. Oh, well, that's good. Well, you'll have better local knowledge than me. So,
That's
is that a valid point?
potentially a valid point that we can take up, but
So we can check that, Brent, because to me, I just thought of if there was room to increase that capacity, that would help.
And certainly the staff comment around water flowing from the sports fields across, so from the other side, it doesn't really, but it is that drain. That issue is where the floodgates are closed and that drain can escape in terms of getting rid of the town stormwater.
Which you can only do at certain tides.
At certain times, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in those extreme events, the wharf gates will be closed, so
Yeah.
the estuary will be empty, so we're not limited by a high tide in that case. So
No.
if we operate the gates,
Can I comment?
it works.
Yeah, just hang on, I'll just let William finish. So, and then you can come back in, David. So,
I thank you, Kit.
I was finished.
all right.
Yeah.
Righto, David.
Can you go back to the Thorpe drain, please, on Tudor Street and going beyond that to Kingston and through to Clay Street, please. And Greenwood Street.
We're talking this area.
That's right.
Yeah.
The point I want to make is that the Thorpe drain services, as I said earlier on, services a lot of High Street, parts of in the western area, west of Power Street, and then comes through Boy Street, picks up some of Peterbridge, most of Clay and York, and then goes through Kingston Place and meets the open drain in there, just up a bit and on Tudor Street.
I see you, David.
It becomes an open drain from Tudor Street there, where you right through to the Old Wharf Road. Keep going south. Yep, that's right. That's the main drain for the most of Motueka.
Yeah.
And that's what I keep on asking for, a updated electronic gate at the Old Wharf Road end. Because if you're there today looking at the tide coming in, most of the tide goes up the drain and it's never ever empty. And
Can
that would
staff
help.
comment on that? Is that?
That would help resolve some of the problems of drainage in Clay, Petherbridge, and even High Street and the
But
like.
David, you would put the gate at Old Wharf Road, but a
Well,
new gate.
There is already a concrete flap gate there, but it's not very effective at all. The tide just comes in and for some reason it's not flapping against the tide at this stage. An electronic gate like there is at the end of Woodlands Avenue, or sorry, the Woodlands Drain, would be very effective. And that would help.
Yep.
Because those two drains are parallel, but the Thorpe drain picks up a lot more stormwater than the Woodlands drain. In about the year 2000, I think it was either Tonkin and Taylor or Becker or maybe in Montgomery Watson, may have done a study for Motueka and for TDC about the capacity of the Woodlands drain. In the year 2000, that even then had limited capacity. And since then we've added some areas to it, such as Sander Lane areas. So that's why I keep on mentioning the lack of capacity in the Woodlands drain, which we have to look at with the Wakatu subdivisions. But going back to the Thorpe drain, we can help that by having a much more effective electronic gate at the Old Wharf Road end of the Thorpe drain. I've also asked for a pump station somewhere around the Tudor Street end, or even if you like the Clay Street end, to try and get the water more quickly into that Thorpe drain. Because it's low lying, a very slow gradient, the quicker you get the water to the gate, the better. And if that's the electronic gate, then it will help resolve some of the stormwater problems. And that's how I see it. And I've had some engineer who comments not too negatively about those two suggestions. In Nelson, for example, you've got at least two flood water pumps. You've got a third one being proposed already at the one of the streams just south of the aerodrome. Over in Blenheim, you've got flood pumps all over the place. Why we can't have them in Motueka, some residents have got them individually. And I've seen them well used with the fire service in the 2013 flood we had. But you know, for some reason, pumping stations for Motueka are sacrosanct, not allowed.
Right, well, so we're going to get a comment on that. So let's get a comment from staff. So that's a new electronic gate at on the Thorpe drain at Wharf Road. Would that assist?
That's it. Yes.
So, unfortunately, Mr. Chair, that will have very little effect on flooding in that area to the north of Tudor Street. So it will help, you know, Thorpe drain itself, but the flooding to the north, so the area draining into Thorpe drain, the issue there is lack of capacity. But it's not the fact that Thorpe drain doesn't have capacity. Thorpe drain has approximately 3 cubics capacity. The system draining into it, not anywhere near 3.
So what you're saying is the area above it doesn't have the capacity to get the water to it.
Yes. So you can open up Thorpe, you can increase the capacity, you can improve the outlet, but that will have very limited effect if you're not also increasing the capacity of the network feeding into it.
And the network feeding into it is open, some open drains, some closed.
No, all closed.
No, that's
All
all
closed.
pipe. That's all pipe.
That's
So-
all existing pipes.
Hence the proposed solution, the most sort of the best possible solution we can think of, or our consultants can think of, is bringing Thorpe drain up into that area as an open drain, an open green corridor, quite far up north.
That would be really, really expensive.
And that would be really expensive. We need to buy up a lot of property to create a green corridor. Yes.
Chairman, Rafa, so you have estimated how many properties will benefit if you do that? It's in the order of
28
and the estimated cost?
600.
per property. 300, 30 million in total, the estimate.
Geez, that's a lot. Okay. So the alternative is some soakage or not? Or would that not benefit either?
we don't think soakage in this area is going to work very well because it's so low lying and already quite close to the coast.
So what is a solution for up there? The words are not one.
There are some improvements we can make potentially to overflow, and there is a pipe through Greenwood that can maybe reduce some of the nuisance flooding if we increase it. We think that could. Worth investigating. That's a suggestion in the plan. It's worth investigating a pipe upgrade in Greenwood if we combine it with a reduction in inflow and infiltration in our wastewater. So if we can reduce wastewater overflows, and that's another sort of added benefit, and it would justify quite significant cost. However, other engineers in council, like Jeff Gutson, give it a very low chance. But I think it's worth investigating. I've got, I've got some hope.
Okay, right, so in terms of process, I just, one of the things that I'd like to do at some stage is we need to be, if we're going to go to recommendations, do we need to go into committee if we're going to talk about specific areas?
Yeah,
Walter,
in terms of the maps and things and talking about flooding on individual properties, it's already all in the public realm. So I don't think so in regards to that. If you wish to discuss acquiring individual properties, then I definitely think that it's worth going to the public excluded, particularly out of the commercial position.
Correct. Right. David, did you have another?
yeah, I have, well, who's advising you in terms of the 28 million to go from Tudor Street north towards Clay and the others, which you just mentioned? You said 30 million, but I think the exact figure was 28 million we've had from yourselves. Who was the advisor for that?
Our consultant, you mean?
Who was the consultant then?
We have used Tonkin and Taylor for that work, for that portion and assessment.
Yeah, I just wonder whether we should peer review that, because in my own mind, Tonkin and Taylor recommended about the Lee Valley Rock as well, and we've got questions to ask about that. It's a minor matter, I know, but
David, I could agree with yeah, it was them with the Lee Valley Rock, and it was them with Waiheke Dam.
I wonder whether
we get everything wrong.
We used to use, I think we used Opus. That's become WSP. They got stormwater engineers. We can actually refer that to them as well as a peer review. But I'm just concerned that we're getting all this advice from Tonkin and Taylor, and it may be spot on, but a peer review of that sort of costing 28 million for that work, and it just seems extraordinary to me. And there must be lower cost options. And I still think, why is the electronic gate Old Wharf Road not useful when already most of the water in the Gulf drain is probably seawater?
All right, David, I've got someone else wanting to speak, so I hear what you say.
I see Richard Kirby's got his hand up.
Yeah. So Richard, we can't see you, but I'm sure we'll be able to hear you.
Yeah, I should be able to see me.
Oh, yeah, we can now.
The comment about peer review, I've got no problems with undertaking a peer review, but I can tell you now, peer review is not going to take the 28 million down to 10. Your peer review, I would imagine, might vary it by 10 or 15%, but you're still going to be talking about massive costs. I think Wouter of all people has actually spent a lot of time on this, and I think we have to carry a lot of weight in what he's saying. And he did state that, putting a pump up there, the reticulation, there's seen some major upgrades to that reticulation and across property that's privately owned. So yeah, I don't think a peer review is actually going to give the outcome you want. And yeah, so that's my comment on that.
Good, thanks, Richard. All right, Barry.
It's not, can I just ask a question? Because it's not really a peer review of the costing, it's really a peer review of the method to deal with the problem of Thorpe Drain and making it more effective for the Boyce Street, Clay Street, High Street issues. That's where I'm coming from.
All right.
Is it worth talking about the MWH study? And so there are actually two studies undertaken in this area, one by TNT and one by MWH. And I think Montgomery Robson probably worthwhile just summarising what they both said, because actually it's kind of occurred already.
Yeah, so the MWH report was done in 2000. The TNT one was done more recently, but in terms of the conclusions and the options that they both kind of came to were extremely similar.
Yeah.
Bar the costs. But
But the
they were both drainage, network upgrades. Yeah, and ruled a lot of them out due to going through private property and not actually dealing with the overland flow paths themselves.
Yeah.
Well, they were a few years apart, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
2000.
Yeah, so even with quite different and now outdated modeling technologies, MWH came up with similar conclusions. So you could say TNT did almost a peer review of that, even though they didn't see the report. So quite independently, different modeling methodologies, they came up with very similar conclusions, and unfortunately no real solutions for this area. I hate to say it. I mean, I wish I could come up with something for this area.
Right.
Okay.
There's no silver bullet. No.
Barry?
Yeah, just normally when there's a pipe through someone's property, is it not done with an easement situation, or was that back in the day when it was just a handshake and a beer at the pub? So we don't have any easements where our stormwater pipes run all through the private properties.
I believe we have some, but not everywhere.
Now we put new ones in with heavy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just part of that, because even a 50 upgrade in the size of the pipe, even though it's not going to clear the area down, it's got to help.
Especially in the nuisance type situation, that could help and could reduce some of the flooding and smaller events, but it's still a major loss then.
Yeah. And as far as the wastewater is concerned, we all know that it's the joints and everything in the pipes that are leaking. So as long as the ground water's up, the wastewater is going to cop it. So it's not taking the stormwater away, it's not going to help that much. We've got two lots of money to spend.
Yeah.
Or someone has.
All right. Brent, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I've just got a question because I'm going to have to duck off at 3, but you might be in committee then. But so I think we started on this because you might have asked Mr. Chair about retention and soak pits and that sort of stuff. I'm really confused after the consultation what recommendations the panel's looking at making, because we've seemed to looked at a whole lot of issues that we don't see as being affordable or singing a matrix that's going to be cost per property relevant. So I'm really confused the outcome of the consultation for the plan and what exactly may be going to get recommended or endorsed. I'm just lost.
Well, I think we're going to have a number of initiatives, but I'm only one voice at this stage. But I think if you have a look at it, they're talking about some upgrades in pipes. And we're also talking about some retention or soakage. So it's going to be a multifaceted approach. And one of the things that I thought is it needs to be prioritised in areas of worst nuisance flooding initially. So that's the very short term. So those are some of the thoughts that I have, but I've got two fellow committee members that are here today, and we also have to take the staff advice. But it's got to be a multifaceted approach from what I can see, because there's some definite pipe upgrades that we're talking about in certain areas, and what we've just been talking about is in areas where it won't necessarily work. So, because what they said is the problems is quite widespread.
Has Brent seen the report?
I'm not sure if you have.
The recommendations in the report?
Through the chair,
I've
it's
only muddled my way through that online presentation thing.
Yeah.
There's quite a number of recommendations in the report, for you, Mr. Chairman, Brent.
So do we able to put that up on the screen for them?
Oh, yeah, sure, we can. It's just you gotta go to council.
Yes.
Mr.
So we
Chair,
might just put that up on the report that for you, Brent.
Thank you. Thank you to be helpful.
Richard, have you got your hand up again?
yeah, just commenting on that discussion around Clay Street and the like, and I just wonder whether perhaps we should have a workshop with either the panel and with Councillor Ogilvie just to talk through what makes up that estimate of $28 million and what needs to be done. Because this question has been asked several times, and I think there's probably a misunderstanding of the problem. It's not just a case of putting a pump or a gate in. There's more to it than that, and I think perhaps some detail around that might actually be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes some sense. Right. So Brent, you can have a quick read through this, because there's a number of. So it's really a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, just through the chair, the resolutions there, the draft resolutions there address submissions from in total 8 submitters.
Yeah.
And so not all of them address these flooding issues that we are discussing. Of course, a number of submitters actually raised issues around how we deal with water quality and stream health. So yeah,
That's part of it.
related to that as well.
But that's a given that we have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Because of the freshwater national policy statement.
But resolution D, investigate widening the scope of the existing Motueka West discharge project and include improvement options for the wider area that addresses flooding. And E, confirm the prioritization of frequently occurring but less severe flooding over rare but extreme flooding is currently proposed.
So that's what I've described and you've described as nuisance flooding to try and address that.
Yeah. There were a number of submitters asking if we can work with property owners on options to solve flooding on their property. So that is resolution F, investigate localized flood issues with property owners, provide site-specific advice.
Yeah.
So that's basically a member of staff going out there, talking to property owners, understanding the problem and advising what can be done, not taking the problem away from them and council solving it.
Yeah.
It's giving them options.
Yeah.
And maybe there are some standardized engineering designs that we can develop and provide.
Just to clarify to the chair, so this is only the changes to the CMP that are recommended by the confirmation on resolution 8. The rest of the other things we've been talking about are already contained in the catchment management plan. That's right.
Yeah.
You know, the investigation of soak pits.
Yeah.
Some of the works that we talked about.
Okay. Does anyone here have a problem with any of that so far? No. Barry?
No, I actually encourage the site visits to do it because a lot of those houses down there are going to have soak pits under their downpipes anyway, which are going to be toasted after a period of time they're silted up. So
Yeah.
we may talk to them about putting in a retention tank, but it catches the first cubic metre of water or something and then dribbles out into a new soak pit that might be dug away over in a different area to help improve things. You know, it's not rocket science, it's just improving what you've already got, and what you've already got might be headed. I know the house I just sold in town not so long ago had one soak pit that had failed, and I had to dig another one to make it right.
Yeah, that's
It just sorted up over a period of time.
Yeah, if you don't maintain it, most certainly, because I know my one's failed in Pew Road.
Well, mine was only 50 years old, so I don't know how it's still.
Mine, but I worked out a bit of system. To let it flow on the lawn. Because it was rent out stone.
Yeah, you have to strain away.
And it did. Right, so Brent, have you started to have a look through these?
Yep, no, I've had a look. It makes sense. Yeah.
But what flows out of this is one, we have to get this through council.
Yeah, so the process from here is well, the normal process would run is we need to reconvene the hearing panel after the workshop.
Yeah.
And normally it would just be you make your recommendations. We basically reconstruct the plan, make those tweaks and put it up for council for adoption, or the strategy and policy committee for adoption in this case. The resolution from the 16th of December had a quirk in it, which means we'll basically take your recommendations, workshop it with council. That I'm expecting to be quite brief because it's a bit unusual. It's really, I view it as more of a briefing to them, I suppose, before they get the final report, which will be to say, please adopt this. All of this information gets appended to the report that goes to them, but it's a referral report. So it's very summarised, essentially saying we've been through this process. You guys have recommended this. We've made those changes. Please adopt. Now, the only thing these resolutions, I think, don't deal with, and something you might want to tune your mind to, is whether you wish to make a recommendation around additional provision of monies in the forthcoming financial year and in 23-24 for pursuing some of the lower cost initiatives here. It's not something that's in there. And essentially, if you recall through the annual plan process, it was kind of parked. I'll be honest, answer, it was kind of parked. There isn't a whole lot of money in there. You're aware of how tight things are. But that is an opportunity to you. My only suggestion would be, you know, the community's given some pretty strong feedback, informally around the cost pressures they're facing. So you need to be mindful of that, of course, when you make any suggestions along budget provisions. I'd probably defer to Walter to, you know, to say what would be meaningful for getting some of those investigations underway in the next year or two. I wouldn't know if that's something.
But there's a counter to that, in that if we don't do this now, because of the three waters, it could be delayed some time.
It could, and we're talking debt here. Most of this will be debt funded.
Yeah.
So, you know, the actual effect on rates is more muted than it might sound. But I'd still probably refer to Walter to ask what would be, in terms of what we can deliver and achieve, what's kind of meaningful, but not.
Do you got a question first, Stuart?
Well, question / comment. Could we make the request along the lines that council consider for the annual plan and the long-term plan?
Absolutely. Yeah. It has to be, because essentially the full council makes those calls, so it can be certainly a request to consider.
Yeah.
So through the chair, we currently have a district-wide budget for minor improvements of 100,000, but it's spread that across the district. When we've discussed this internally, and we think we need at least that just for Motueka for 3 consecutive years, and then pause and see, okay, what's the outcome of these improvements worth 300,000, and then see if we've been able to make a significant difference to that nuisance type flooding.
We might want to spend more than that.
And we might want to spend more than that.
To be honest, if we want to show some improvements, I would have thought you've got to do more. There's a view, and I'm aware of the debt issue, but I'm also aware that goes in 2024, as I understand it, which isn't that far away.
No.
So you would only carry it if you had to carry it for a short period of time. So that's something that we can't decide. But my view would be that I would err on the side of taking action earlier rather than later, simply because I'm concerned that nothing will happen because of the bedding down of these. When you start these new entities, if the work isn't in place, it won't take place for a number of years. Maybe Richard, you could comment on that, but I would have thought we would have to have the work sort of in place for it to continue, because if it's not in place, a new entity would start again, would they not?
No, I don't think so. The new entity will have resolutions, and in terms of service levels, and Taumata Arowai would require some sort of insurance that private properties and particularly houses are not flooded, and things put in place. So they will pick up where we left off and head down that track. So no, there won't be a starting again. No.
All right. So that gives me some comfort, but I still think 300,000 isn't going to cut it, to be honest.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm maybe quite cautious is striking the right balance between spending money on something that is nuisance and how much is it worth to solve that nuisance like flooding. So hence my hesitation to and or more. But there's also other areas in the district, of course, that experience very similar type of nuisance flooding. I see the same expectation there.
All right. Eric?
It's, I don't know whether this is the appropriate time, but I am also concerned about the repairs and maintenance side of things as we sit here at the moment as well. Maybe I'll bring it up at another time or later. Discussing it here, but there's certainly issues within council that I saw for myself last week, meeting with 2 staff members on site about the same problem. I was quite surprised listening to the 2 staff members discuss it between themselves, how they were going to come up with an outcome, and it's to do with stormwater. But also over the last few years, we have copped a lot of cost from outside organisations, I'll say, because when the tomato subdivision was done in Motueka, even though the big stormwater pipe was put down the road, a property on the corner of High Street and on the corner, basically, flooding up to a foot deep right through most of the property. Luckily, the house was on piles that belonged to Mr. Nicky Talley. It turned out that the subdivision was built up by 500 mil. They removed all the topsoil, brought in the clay base, and then put the topsoil back on, and they were supposed to have overland, what do you call them, just flow past the and of course, as soon as the person bought the section, I'm not having that, they filled it in.
Yep. And
it flooded all the sections on High Street, but particularly Mr. Talley's. And I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars we spent, but we put a huge drain in the corner of Mr. Talley's section, which took the problem away. But as far as I can see, that was a waste of money. We couldn't claim it back off the developer or anything like that. And it just blew me away that could happen so easily. We gained how many hundreds of houses, but we also gained a major cost. And it concerns me that possibly could still be going to happen with the Motueka West if we're not careful. I'm really, really concerned because I've seen it happen once before, and building land up and doing stuff like that, and then people come along and pull their swale in, as you call it, that creates problems everywhere else. So I am really worried about it, and I hope council can take a hard line on it when it comes to that. There are a couple of 3 other places in town I can talk about too, where over the years I've been called properties. But my biggest concern today, sitting here along this, is the R&M, and I don't know whether I talk with Richard sometime offline or in another situation, Dwayne or whoever, just to try and work out where the problem is. I've seen it for myself, and hopefully we can come up with a resolution.
Well, that's Richard. You got a comment?
Yeah, Councillor Dowell has just raised an issue that has been a concern for us for quite some time, and that's the definition of where council is responsible in drainage and where there are private drains. And it's not only just Motueka, it's actually right across the whole district. And even out in the country on open roads where there's drains along the road, is it our responsibility as a road controlling authority, or when it's primarily draining property? So there's a whole lot of issues around that, and I have to say that it's not something that's going to be fixed overnight. But I suspect once the water services entity is established, they will continue on with what we're doing. And one of the key things in getting information together for that is that we're going to have to start making some calls about what we know as being a council drain or pipe or whatever, and what is a road drain and what is a private drain. And although we have some idea in most areas, there are still some gaps that we have to finalise. And some of the discussion that Councillor Dowler came across was simply that it wasn't clear whether it was a public, private or road drain. And those are the things that we're not clear about, but we need to be more clear about. And if we're not clear about it, or the new service entity, if stormwater goes in there, we'll have to get some clarity around that.
Okay. All right, so we've been in workshop mode for since we heard the deliberations. Have we heard enough?
Yep.
All right, so what I'd like to do now is close the workshop and then we go in.
I wonder if we could have a quick 5-10 minute break.
Yeah.
Okay,
We'll close the workshop and have a break.
Enjoy your break. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, Brad. So David, we're going to close the workshop and then we might end up making the deliberations in committee.
Right.
Gonna have a workshop. So
That was it. That was our workshop. So we're going to take a break and have a quick cup of tea.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I might come down and join you.
Yeah, good.
yeah, you take your risk.
Deliberation. Okay, so do you want to bring up the agenda on? So do we have to go through each recommendation line by line?
one thing we haven't yet done is introduce the report. So probably Roger needs to just give a very brief introduction to it.
Okay.
You ask any questions you want. You guys go into deliberations. I've certainly sent Tara a couple of possible starting resolutions if you wanted to recommend a council to include them.
All right. You're going to bring it up.
Yeah.
Or you can
Continue
start.
like yours.
Yeah, so here we go.
But that is the web version. Tara, if we're going to change the resolutions, we need and Gabby's got those.
Yeah.
Thanks. Right.
What's that? Doesn't like you.
You can want to read it. Well, that's-
I was gonna crank the screen.
Right. Woody, you're going to start?
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Starting.
yeah, you start.
So just a summary of the report that staff prepared for this information meeting. The report summarizes 8 submissions that we have received during the consultation on the Motueka Catchment Management Plan. We have just heard 2 submitters speak to their submission, and report makes a number of recommended changes to the draft CMP. The staff seek direction from the panel on these changes before we will discuss these in a workshop with council, and after that workshop we will take the finalized CMP to the full council for adoption. So I think we can move on to the recommended changes in the draft resolution. Maybe the chair.
Okay. So this one is.
So running through the chair.
Yeah.
The first 2 resolutions are simply to receive the report and accept the submissions. It might be worthwhile to just running through and explaining each of what the resolutions that are subpart 3 are about.
Yes.
Right, that's what I meant.
So starting with resolution number 3, then these are requests that staff make following change to the draft of like a town capital plan in response to matters that were raised in submissions. So number A there is to include an improvement action to investigate extending and improving existing wetland and estuary areas between Old Fort Road to the street. So this was a submission that was made by Emma King
And the Desmond Nelson Davis, YBN.
How forward.
On board, yeah.
In relation to stream health and water quality. So they have acknowledged the fact that there's value in wetlands and estuaries, and they see an opportunity to improve, especially that area between Old Wharf Road and Tudor Street. So basically where there's now sports fields and paddocks, we agree that there's an opportunity to, for example, naturalize parts of woodland drain and thorpe drain, and staff recommends to investigate what the opportunities are.
All right. People happy with that?
You just want to work through these as
Yeah.
the chairman, and then at the end, someone perhaps move on.
Yeah, as long, and we just make sure we're all happy with them as we go. So we're happy with that.
So then B is to identify and better articulate the risk of wastewater overflow to human health and into CMP, and how this relates to stormwater management in particular areas in Motueka, and increase the priority of the improvement action to investigate ways to reduce stormwater infiltration into the wastewater network from medium priority to a high priority. So this again relates to that problem area in the northeast of Motueka, Clay, Moffat, Greenwood. We experience wastewater overflows there that relate to stormwater inflow into that network. And this is in response to a submitter saying plan could better articulate that combination, the link between stormwater and wastewater, and also prioritize the action to investigate that.
That would actually mean visiting every property. In a sense, wouldn't it?
We don't need to get down to that with detail.
Yeah,
It's not that big an area.
there's a new way of investigating infiltration.
Yes.
So there is already an infiltration and inflow program underway by our operations team, and that this build on that.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah,
Already ongoing.
How they do it, see.
Yeah.
All right, we're happy with that? Well,
Some of them,
we've had problems in brand new suburbs.
This particular one, sort of, they use the gym.
Yeah.
They're doing something, they, Clay Street, and it's probably every chance. It's basically totally.
Okay, let's see.
C is to include links to existing council documents that provide better insight into known water quality issues in Motueka. Wasn't one submitter saying that there's more information available that's not being shared by the catchment management plan around water quality. We looked into that and we agree that there's a number of documents that we could link and use to find it.
Can I just ask a question on that? So water quality, we're talking about surface water quality or the ground?
Service water quality primarily. Did we want to
We
talk about?
will be linking to a report that is a groundwater report.
Okay.
And it'll be two reports, one is groundwater.
Because there was a lot of stakeholders in place.
Yes, sir.
That makes sense. Okay.
Then D is to investigate widening the scope for the existing Motueka West District project, include improvement options for the wider area, including flooding at the High Street, Red Street intersection.
And that's the one we discussed.
That's the one we discussed. Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. And that's one where we can actually make a real difference.
Correct.
And E is to confirm the prioritization of frequently occurring but less severe flooding over rare but extreme flooding, as is currently proposed in the catchment management plan.
And during the workshop, we didn't get adverse feedback from community board chair or the councillor.
I don't think so, but
The comment you made though was, there's nuisance flooding in other places as well. But I think this is an issue.
Fundamentally, the issue is that the kind of infrastructure they'd like to see, and they might see in places of Richmond are not cost effective for the spend in Motueka. So our focus is on doing what we can.
Yes.
Through the chair, and in addition to what Blaine was saying, staff wanted to make this specific because it's a deviation from the stormwater strategy which applies to the wider district. So in this stage, we're deviating from the strategy in Motueka, prioritize that more frequent but less severe flooding, which is not what we're doing elsewhere.
Yeah, and there are reasons for that.
And there are reasons for that. I agree.
Because to try and fix the extreme flooding here, because we just can't do it.
Rewater as well. So
Yeah, well, it's the same real.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we can defend that as both as a committee, but as a council. And I'm the one who's got to live with it. That's all right.
F is to investigate localized flood issues with property owners and provide site-specific advice on potential improvement actions. So that's in response to a number of submitters asking council to work with property owners and identify potential solutions that are for the property owner to implement, but council can assist in advising, which way to go.
agree.
G then is to include a table with improvement actions around implementing water sensitive design, and that was an omission in the CMP that was picked up by submitter. All themes have an action, a table with improvement actions, but this particular theme was missed an improvement action table. So
just think like what this water seats.
So water sensitive design, it particularly relates to how we deal with stormwater in new developments, and it's how you mimic sort of natural hydrology. So less relying on pipe, more relying on open drainage, ensuring that those open flow paths that are naturally there are incorporated within it. Those types of interventions, ensuring that we capture those.
We have a table of those, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and this submitter was asking, hey, can you tableize that in specific improvement actions rather than just saying you will improve water sensitive design? Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thing.
It will directly link into that.
But we do that on a, for you, we do that on a township thing, because you're not going to be able to probably do
No.
or you got to do it on sort of a catchment. How are you going to do that?
In Motueka, it will primarily relate to how we manage stormwater in that Motueka West area.
So you'll be.
But when we did that, by the way, we were here too, but I think we got that first plan for the Motueka West development, they had all the swales going through the island in the corner, and they had big stormwater drain going through.
Yeah.
That was a design done back in the day.
The advantage is that it doesn't really trigger.
But
Because of what happened with Wakatu Corporation and their license, that plane never got me.
No, what you just said, it was.
But there's also, if I may add that to the chair, in that relatively new substance, I think it's Semata, there are a number of swales in the medium boom, but they're actually not designed as a stormwater swale. So those could be improvements. We could identify them as an improvement action to actually retrofit them as a proper.
Yeah, well, they got big booms down the middle of the road.
Yeah. But the water actually can't really get it. Yeah.
All right,
You could design.
No, they put them in the next telly.
That's what that is about. H is to articulate more clearly the main responsibilities for roadside drains. So that was discussed during the workshop as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. We had a discussion over smoke on that.
Just wonder whether we should ask that particularly clear. Responsibility for the drain for this. The roadside drains on its own, if you interpret that, some people have road drains and roadside much. Oh, council, the one is roadside drain, yeah. So just. Council rolls like this. Who?
Yeah.
Just one thing, council drains, roadside drains, yeah. Okay. Council owned roadside, very good.
But some of them, we state highway.
So, hang up, yeah, side of the road.
Maybe discuss with the TA. They know where it's so trying
No, I've seen,
Sometimes it.
I was watching one on the way to, just as you go over Wongamara, they just spent a fortune redoing that roadside drain on the other side of the Wongamara, on the right-hand side, heading to the right down. Yeah, they just, they were there for weeks.
And it's from storm there, wasn't it?
No, they've lined that whole drain with rock.
Through the chair, just so that Gabby can be prepared for a possible suggested change to the resolution. What was the wording there for H?
Council roadside drains.
Yeah.
Council owned roadside drains. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So if I read that as one sentence, articulate more clearly the maintenance, roles and responsibilities for council-owned roadside drains.
Is that where you got council owned is correct?
Council owned.
Yeah, we just have to put in the roles and responsibilities.
So we are.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, so that was articulate more clearly roles and responsibilities for maintenance. So I'm conscious, is it Gabby that's on the line there? She may not have heard the first part of the sentence.
So Gary's ready to type this up in the office.
Yeah.
She knew it.
I think Tara's sitting in 3 different. What is?
Yeah.
She said she can't hear when there's more than one person talking.
That's naughty.
Never heard of that county.
Okay, yeah, that's all right.
And I is to include an improvement action to investigate limit drain capacity and maintenance issues. And that was raised by a submitter, acknowledging that limit drain is actually quite an important outlet for stormwater in that Motueka East area. It's private property and we don't have clear maintenance roles and responsibilities for that drain. So that's that action to
Just clarify, where Lance Drain actually is. That's not the one that goes
Down the bottom of Ferry Street.
right.
people been around.
Screen my height.
Oh, sorry.
So these two.
Oh, there's one. Oh, right. Ah,
Yeah.
that's the one you were looking at over the top end, wasn't it?
That's really low lying land, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Yeah.
well,
I'm with you now. Sorry.
walking through, we're talking about 30 years ago about making it a service paradise for Motueka by building up houses and having canals all through there.
Well, that's what that's.
Nelson.
But yeah, that's
Hawanui Waterway.
talking to owned it. Leased by an orchardist called Mr. Peter Ingles. He graze in new cattle, and that's the one where our drain's running on their land.
Yeah.
Okay. Even Peter said, well, when it gets too blocked, we give it a bit of a scratch in our digger. We keep the water flowing, and that's the landowner. But does it need to be fenced? Keep his cattle out of it? Does it need to be?
Yeah, it does.
You know,
The
but
lot through owns the water bit.
Water owns the land.
owns the bottom.
So if you look at it behind, you can see that.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh, yeah, there you go.
That's definitely a waterway that's more than a metre and deeper than a red.
oh, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's not good. It's a flat.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
They've flooded a lot of the time.
We have floodgates. Either there.
That is really, really low line.
It is. Yeah.
And they were floating floodgates up about 6 years ago.
Wouldn't that be below sea level then in places?
Guaranteed to me, yeah, it actually goes up till as you get to the coast. So
Yeah, that's
you
what I
can see it
thought.
right.
Because I remember driving past it and saying, no wonder they never built on this.
Yeah.
All right, well, that makes sense. Okay, so we can go back to the resolution. Does Tara know what we're going to add in? I mean, right.
So that's where we've got to on I. 4 is simply, if you don't mind me, sorry, Ron. Is to give effect to the resolutions above and preparing the town catchment management plan. And there's a resolution 5 there to basically do minor tweaks here and there. And 6 is that agree that once we've prepared all that, we basically present that to council by a workshop before we send it to full council for adoption on the 30th of June, following that process. And the reason it's not going to strategy and policy is because it's full council who directed it, who approved the draft, not strategy and policy.
And this was as a result of some problems we had in the full council meeting, where council overruled was going to try and add some money and he wasn't going to get it through. That's all we set up.
Has anyone wanted to put 3 million?
If you wanted to suggest anything differently, of course you need to move and second that for changes of resolution. And after understanding, speaking earlier, we've drafted a couple in terms of making suggestions through to council for consideration. I don't know if you want to discuss it first before we put them up, or you want us to put it up now, which would probably come up for 6 appropriately.
Put it up where
So that's the zone.
I mean, you made a comment, I was quizzing you about, we're going to do a presentation to them, or do you think you're doing that before it comes to council on the 30th of June?
I am, because that's what we were, the full council resolved us to do in terms of the process.
So you'll be going to the Motueka Community Board of June meeting?
Oh, apologies, no, the workshop is with council. It's essentially the workshop is with council to talk to them about the outcome of this process.
What about the Motueka Community Board? We have been not being expected with the result of this.
Oh, we can certainly can, but they don't have a role. They don't have a role in the decision making.
All right.
I'll be happy to do that.
I thought you sent to me while we had the discussion along those lines back into the community board. Okay.
So now is everybody happy with this? So we suggest, and not this only adds 5,000 to the actual budget and 100,000 to the debt because it's capital, correct?
Through the chair, yes, it's a bit. I did actually just in the break ask staff what would be a meaningful amount to start on and yield the 2022-23 year, and they actually suggested $75,000 rather than 100, with the balance in the following year being say 225.
You don't spend it, you can move it into the next year.
But in that ballpark.
My view is if you had anything less than that, we get a reaction from certain ward council that causes problems in the full council. And it's just a start, it's got to be spent, and it's to allow you to come up with some concrete stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
What you could do, and obviously the student council, it's rather than load your annual plan now, because you've been through a consultation on it, it's to ask council to permit you to spend 100,000, recover it from the UDA rate starting 1st of July 2023.
If you think that's better.
Well, I just want the finance guys, because you're going to be delivering on the annual plan.
Yeah,
and this is an item that you've added in, you haven't consulted on. And it may actually be, I don't know, just on the comments side, all of a sudden you're 5.14 with all these things, because I'm thinking of the Gold Bay grandstand as well.
Talking about that soon. All right, so what's the wording we put there then?
Well, can I suggest you don't
change the wording, but just
when it comes to the
discussion. For discussion.
All right. Well, you'll need to note that and prompt either the deputy mayor or myself or Barry to have that on the day.
Okay.
All right. So you want to make a note of that somewhere, Richard?
And as soon as you come to that point, I can tell you what the finance guys will probably do.
Yeah, so what we can say is rather than funding it, we'll just put it on the UDA and repay it the following year.
Correct.
So it just increases the debt and the
and all you do is you might have a bit of extra interest and loan costs.
And through to that is effectively what we've got here. So the normal approach would be to pay off 1/20th of the amount in the first year, which is in this case $5,000. So it would in the scheme of things, council need to consider our ways of consider priority stuff, but it's not in of itself a huge sum.
The Golden Green seems 10,000, that's 0.03%. Gives you an indication.
Yes. Yeah, that's based on loan money of 20.
Yes. Okay, well, that makes sense. So what we have to do, what we have to be prepared for is that first block to go into the UDA if we have to. So the second block doesn't, because that's part of the
Well, through the chair, that would be a recommendation to the incoming council to include that $200,000 in next year's annual plan. So that will be before the 3 water entities established. But as you noted before, the collective debt, the balance of the collective debt, which will be probably something like $290,000 or something like that, will roll into the 3 water entities.
Yeah, so we lose.
Do we have any idea where the 200 is likely to be spent? It doesn't sound like a lot to me. I want to put a figure in there for Carnix's delivery.
Yeah, we've got some ideas.
It's got a year final.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just probably need some thought to if the question is asked in this resolution.
We'll definitely
You've got that.
next budget. Yeah.
So you've got a few weeks to come up with. All right. So Tara, are you happy with that? So you've got it? Are you two gentlemen happy? Yep. Will that be enough, Barry? Yep. Well, it won't be enough today, but it's a start.
But it's better than a lot.
Yeah.
Been on here 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, but not only that, it's a start, isn't it? So we've got some idea. All right, well, Stu, are you happy to move that? And Barry, second it?
I think I'm more likely to get that through, we'll cancel them 5 million.
Well, we weren't going to get 5 million through at all, but they had no plan of action. We just put some money in and we'll spend it.
Yeah. So I'm happy to move.
Okay. Move, so let's move Deputy Mayor Brian, seconded Councillor Dowler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, Gary. That's all we have to do.
Probably for Tara's benefit, it might be also useful because you just moved and seconded the addition of resolution 7 and 8 is where I interpret that.
No, we did the whole lot.
The whole lot.
That's what we went through, and at the end of each one, I asked them if they accepted.
Yeah.
So that's
Right.
Jim, can I just ask another question? This is beyond the 200,000. Are we going to be able to, Councillor Ogilvy's raised this several times, likely over the next 20 to 25 years, what the level of investment is likely to be to implement Motueka CMP?
That probably relatively best to talk to this, but one of the difficult things is that we've got some definite projects in there, but then there's a lot of we need to investigate. And it's only once those have been completed, then you'll probably have a good idea of what the total spend is.
What time frame are you talking about for that?
Oh, it's probably, well, it would be nice to say we can get them all completed within 5 years, but the way,
No, I'm just talking about the program, the more detailed work on what needs to be done to implement the various components.
Program business case.
Basically, yeah.
But isn't there also a split, Richard, going forward? Because freshwater protection is part of the catchment management plan.
Yeah.
But stormwater is part of the 3 waters. And the 2 are going to be separate in some ways.
Well, I think you will find that within an urban catchment, my discussions on the stormwater, it's all going to be servicing the freshwater aspect. So
a creek running in within that catchment, all right, that runs into the Motueka River, so it's running the other way. Would that all part of the?
If it goes through an urban area, there will be some obligations on the water services entity to make sure that whatever discharges into that meets the regional council.
So will that be within the drainage area? Because I'm just thinking of what.
It could be.
So because you have a look at the moment, a good example of Richmond, the current boundary for the Richmond drainage area is McShane's Road. But that's liable to change because of the development, we're putting a commercial mixed business on the other side of that road.
Well, can I say, I've had this discussion with Wouter and before we had this meeting. is that the water services entity in our discussions at the moment, it's not about lines on the ground in terms of UDAs, it's about purpose and function. And purpose and function is, and it's not an easy thing because at one point you've got big rivers like the Waimea River, which we're not going to take over, that's still going to be part of the regional council
Function.
authority function. But what we manage and how we discharge into the environment that feeds into the Waimea River, that's where, so we have a point of entry and a point of discharge. Now, that may not be a line on the map, it may actually be where the infrastructure is that discharges into the environment.
And
So-
then there's another example of this where, if you have a look at.
Sorry, this. I'll give you-
No, that's what I think it's what
We haven't closed the meeting. I'm just wondering if you want to do that first and then we can.
All right, we'll close the meeting and then I want to ask, which is another question. All right, so we'll formally close the meeting. No, you're not allowed to disappear because I've got to talk to you about something else.